It's not really a secret that Hoyoverse tends to prioritize their female characters over their male ones when it comes to generating hype. Even outside of the skewed ratio across all their games' rosters, highly anticipated female characters had their banners lined up with major updates. Meanwhile, the dudes are 3 for 3 on limited 5-star characters given out as a free login bonus. She didn't have a banner, so I'm not counting her. Of course, this is likely a business decision more than anything, as we still have plenty of great male representatives, but it puts into perspective how much of an anomaly it is for Phainon to be getting the treatment he's been receiving. Multiple trailers, top-up sales, an intro animation on login with a shortcut to his banner, the marketing strategy is in full force. Of course, he is a mirror to a certain Kevin from Honkai Impact 3rd, but even then, I didn't quite expect they'd go this hard on designing his gameplay. It's not just the visuals, captivating as they are, but the entire way that he functions. They did an amazing job of translating his story arc into his gameplay, while ensuring that he is uniquely powerful unlike any other character in Star Rail history. Let's break down how the devs did Phainon justice. Well, first off, he's not an imaginary type. I wish that was just a joke, but guys make up 70% of the imaginary roster, and around 30% of all playable males in the game are imaginary, which is about double the expected distribution. Okay, but for real, the thing that instantly stands out with Phainon is that he has a unique gauge for his ultimate. It seems like an easy way to make characters feel distinct and powerful, just like they did with Acheron, Phainon, and Casterus, but it's quite a bit more significant than that in what it does for his design. The first part of Phainon's talent states that he requires 12 points of core flame to use his ultimate, a nice parallel to the core flames we've gotten so familiar with over the course of version 3's story. Up to 3 excess points of core flame can be stored and are subsequently restored after his ultimate ends, which is a really nice feature to have. The universal energy system is intentionally flawed in a way that's meant to make you think a little bit more on your feet in the middle of combat. Sometimes the optimal play is to hold onto your ultimate for another turn, even though you'd be intentionally wasting some energy generation in the process and thus postponing your next potential ult. Playing on auto mode would have you waste that energy altogether. Casterus is a bit of an exception with her percent-based charge, but for the rest with point-based systems, they all have instant use, high power ultimates, so it makes sense that you'd really want to save them for an opportune moment. As such, they all can overstack without being so heavily punished, and the point system makes for a very easy to understand way of facilitating that. Typically, you'd think of this coming into play when you don't want to spend the resources for an ultimate finishing off a low health enemy, but it's also really helpful in ensuring you are able to coordinate all your team's buffs before you use it. This is especially relevant for Phainon because of the way he interacts with allies and their abilities. He can generate 2 core flame stacks for himself using his skill, which is otherwise just a standard 3 target blast attack, but he also gets one anytime he's the target of any ally ability or enemy attack. Star Rail's teams of 4 most commonly fall into the structure of a damage dealer, a healing or shielding sustain support, an ally buffing or enemy debuffing damage amplifying support, and a flexible slot which tends to be used for a sub DPS or another amplifier. The term hypercarry is often used to refer to the main DPS in a setup without a secondary damage dealer, and characters meant to be in this role are designed to fit in it by either being heavily reliant on support from allies or being so powerful with such good options for teammates that having another DPS wouldn't contribute much. Phainon takes this to a whole new level by directly scaling with the number of supports on the team, as they enable him to get faster ultimates off by generating his core flame stacks. He additionally gets a free 30% crit damage for 3 turns after receiving a buff as even further incentive. This uniquely gives him the most hypercarry centric design in the entire game. Phainon still retains the advantages that regular energy charge would typically have over unique gauges, being that characters regenerate a small amount of energy when receiving an attack and can also be accelerated by energy generating abilities from allies. Not only is Phainon also able to get core flames after getting hit by enemies, but he also gets an additional point when he's the target of an energy regen ability, so 2 total when you factor in him being targeted. This is especially nice because plenty of strong supports Phainon would already want to use provide energy, so his 4th Ascension trace allows this utility to still have high value on him compared to otherwise. Because of all this, you might think you're heavily encouraged to run 3 damage amps to supercharge Phainon, but running no sustain can make the outcome of fights more luck reliant, hoping you don't have that one unit that gets piled on. To combat this, his A4 trace also gives Phainon a sizable 45% damage increase for 4 turns when he receives healing or shielding. No healer is still a powerful option, but running one is much less punishing thanks to this. And since you're going to be surrounding Phainon with supports, he's able to help them out a little with his technique. After using it to start combat, all allies generate 25 energy and an additional skill point. His supports will have no problems getting all of their buffs active at the start of battle, which is really nice because you won't have to delay his first ultimate. His technique also one-shots small enemies in the overworld like Acherons, which may appear to just be a way to sell him as a material farmer, but it actually makes a lot of sense to have because of his combat. He really doesn't do a lot of damage before ulting, and since his points don't carry over between battles, this would make multiple individual fights much more time consuming compared to other characters, while also demonstrating how powerful these characters are meant to be in universe. Once you activate Phainon's ult, which has the coolest ability name in the entire game, he activates his domain expansion. This causes all of your allies to temporarily leave the field, once again reinforcing that he is the team's sole damage dealer. He then gets 8 extra turns with a fixed speed equal to 60% of his base speed, which notably doesn't include stats from relics. This is pretty interesting because up until now, we've only had extra turns in the context of a single additional action, such as using an enhanced skill immediately into an attack skill. The important distinction between extra turns and 100% action advance is that extra turns don't count as a turn expired for your character's buffs. So even though Phainon's 8 don't really act like the extra turns we're used to because they continue down the action timeline, he's importantly able to maintain all buffs for the entire duration of his ultimate, which was pretty necessary considering his allies aren't there to refresh them. The fixed speed also makes him uniquely not scale with speed substats as much as other DPSs, though the devs did take the low-hanging fruit and make his signature light cone and E1 give him extra speed. He's still very functional without these additions, but they exist for those who want to give Phainon that extra bit of combat power. I've seen some comments calling him a playable final boss, and honestly there couldn't be a more accurate way to describe him. For the duration of the ultimate, Phainon gets much tankier, which makes a lot of sense considering there won't be anyone around to heal him. He becomes completely immune to crowd control, gains 270% max HP, restores 20% of it after attacking, and has access to even more defensive utility with his skills. During his transformation, he has access to an enhanced basic attack and 2 enhanced skills. His general game plan is to use his new basic and first skill to generate stacks, and when he has 4 of those, his second skill does a huge amount of bounce damage. Each of his enhanced abilities are clearly designed to make him a flexible damage dealer that can work in basically any scenario, which is very emblematic of the Destruction Path's gameplay role as a middle ground between the Hunt's single target and Erudition's area of effect damage. The enhanced basic generates 2 stacks and deals damage in a blast, being effective when there are only a few enemies present. Meanwhile, his enhanced skill 1 generates stacks for the number of enemies on the field, and he causes all enemies to take action before launching a massive counter. He also gets 75% damage reduction, so having to tank those attacks is mostly trivial. Each enemy action increases the counter's damage, further incentivizing you to use it against large waves, but unlike other counter abilities in the game, Phainon doesn't actually need to receive an attack. The enemy simply taking their action, even if it's not a damaging ability, contributes to the multiplier. This is a pretty nice clarification in that you don't need to worry about the types of enemies you're facing. Although the animation for receiving 5+ attacks can feel pretty unnecessary at times, having them action advanced allows for unique interactions against certain bosses. For example, the True Sting can be forced to make more of the smaller bugs, and once popped, they stack up the boss with vulnerability debuffs. Overall, a very interesting take on a counter, but it makes a lot of sense as an ability built for AoE scenarios. And lastly, the second skill bounces, meaning it distributes its damage relatively evenly across all enemies, but the final portion deals damage that is explicitly evenly distributed to all enemies. This means it's consistently equally effective against waves of 5 as it is a single boss monster. Once the ultimate runs out of extra turns, it activates a final hit that once again does evenly distributed damage. I believe this is the first time Star Rail has implemented a mechanic like this in a character, and it's a pretty genius way to design around effectiveness in any possible combat scenario. Single target can't put out enough damage to take out waves, and AoE attacks lose value on single enemies, but Phainon handles both cases just fine with 2 abilities each. It also adds another thing to be aware of in battle that you should play around, as picking off side enemies first will let you funnel more damage into that single boss. This contextualizes why he can get up to 7 stacks on his skill, and his strongest attack requires 4. It makes it less punishing to hold on to them as you position the field more favorably, but you can't use it twice without weaving in another attack first. In a vacuum, adding one additional attack as an option isn't that crazy, but when you factor in how they interact with the game's mechanics and each other, they contribute so much to Phainon's overall design. He feels like a boss enemy, which in this game have a lot more attacks than your typical character, and even though having no allies removes 3/4 of your normal gameplay, Phainon compensates for it with abilities that are interesting to use and have plenty of visual spectacle. In terms of representing the destruction path, his kit also does a great job at that, with flexible enemy targeting and meaningful use of defensive mechanics. I wouldn't say I have any legitimate complaints about the design, but there are some additions where I'd say the devs did a little bit more than they realistically needed to. First, his ultimate has an additional property in that all enemies gain physical weakness for its duration. This does follow the trend of point-based ultimates being able to ignore weakness types in some form, but for Phainon in particular, it's not quite as useful compared to the others. I'm not sure why it's an implant over ignoring weakness type, because it's not like Phainon can have physical allies on the field to take advantage of it like Firefly. It doesn't do anything about enemies without natural physical weakness having a 20% resistance, as you'll need his second Eidolon to level the playing field there. He obviously doesn't do much break damage, and the typical upside of delaying enemy actions doesn't do nearly as much for him because he already has a high HP pool with constant healing, is immune to crowd control, and can remove debuffs from himself. His relatively slow turns also means he has a harder time capitalizing on delaying a boss calling in additional enemies, so the most convincing reason I could think of to have this is that occasionally certain bosses have mechanics tied to being weakness broken, and this acts as a failsafe for those cases. That, or they just wanted to make him feel powerful. Another interesting feature is what happens if Phainon is to get knocked out during his ultimate. He restores 25% of his max HP and instantly launches his final attack, and that part's all well and good, but weirdly enough, its damage is decreased by 1/8 for each extra turn you had remaining. I feel like losing those actions is punishing enough, so I found it surprising there's a second drawback. I want to say the intention is so that you can't ult into an immediate almost 1000% attack nuke, but because he has so much built-in survivability to begin with, it's fairly difficult to lose all your HP even intentionally. So I find it hard to believe that this is something which could possibly be exploited. Probably won't matter 99% of the time though. Phainon's overall design is already so complete that his 2 ascension traces, which I haven't mentioned yet, are just simple number buffs to help his uptime and damage. A2 gives him a core flame at the start of battle and 3 more after his ult ends, on top of whatever excess you stored beforehand. This makes his ult easily reusable after just one rotation. His A6 grants him a permanent 50% attack buff at the start of battle and another 50% after his ult, giving him a bit of ramp up towards the later phases of fights. The last detail which I wasn't able to fit in anywhere else is that after the ult ends, all allies get 15% speed for 1 turn, which I guess is just a nice little bonus to help the team go through the rotations after his next ult. Character themes appearing in how their unit plays in combat is something which can be really hit or miss in a turn-based game like Star Rail. There are plenty of examples of good, clear execution like with Aventurine, who's a gambler and thus has random elements present in his gameplay. But at the same time, we have characters whose lore and personalities can't really translate well to abilities, like Ranmei's entire lore focusing on biology being mostly lost on her playing her instrument to give the team break-focused damage buffs. Phainon in particular, however, feels really special in this regard. Without going into spoilers, his gameplay loop is reminiscent of his story. He acquires the 12 core flames with the help of his allies, but in the end, he's isolated, and after everything's said and done, he's doomed to repeat it all over again. Overall, Phainon's design is simply a masterful execution, delivering on every aspect for a character we've all been excited to use and learn more about since 3.0. Looking at some early statistics, it seems that the player base fully agrees, with Phainon's banner doing insane numbers. This is more than enough evidence to say that male characters can be extremely successful if given the proper care and attention like Phainon's gotten, so hopefully we will see more in the future. I hope you found this design breakdown interesting. Subscribe for more Star Rail discussion videos or become a member to support the channel, and as always, thanks for watching.